Welcome, everyone, to the Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. This session is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube with the link on our website. Our website is icssmarx.org. That will be up in the next few days. ICSS stands for the Institute for the Critical Study of Society. For getting close to 2 decades, our sessions were first held at the Marxist Library in Oakland, California. Now we host our sessions on Zoom, so I should say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as we have speakers and attendees from around the United States and sometimes throughout the world. My name is Sharon, and I'm today's moderator. I'm a member of the ICSS program committee that organizes this forum. Our committee always welcomes input, feedback, and suggestions for topics and speakers, and you can contact us through our website, again, icssmarx.org. This is a comradely forum for political discourse and debate. As such, we ask that you show respect for our participants and the moderator of today's session. Please note that the opinions expressed are those of the speaker and the participants. They do not necessarily represent those of ICSS. However, we are united in our respect for the work of Karl Marx, and we believe that his work remains relevant today. Our motto is taken from Marx's 11 Theses on Feuerbach. The philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Our program today is entitled Viet Nam, 50 Years of Peace. Huge parades in Ho Chi Minh City this spring mark the 50th anniversary of April 30th, 1975, when a North Vietnamese army tank crashed through the iron gates of the U.S. Embassy in Sai Gon. And most of us here probably remember where we were that day. I do. The military took the lead in that parade this year, but it soon changed to beautiful peace floats, music, doves, flowers, and thousands of workers and children, along with colorful cultural costumes. Our speaker, Nadya Williams, observed the celebrations and traveled throughout the country. She says, although Vietnam is looking to the future, the past is always present. During the so-called Indochina War, Vietnam, along with Laos and Cambodia, received more explosive power than World War I and II combined. It remains the largest aerial bombardment in human history. Nadya will share what she learned from encounters with many people of Vietnam about Vietnam's transformation since the war's end and the still long road ahead. Nadya is a freelance journalist who has been an active associate member of Veterans for Peace since 2003. She is on the board of the Vietnam Chapter 160 of Veterans for Peace and director of communications for the San Francisco Chapter 69. Nadya, please take it away.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sharon, for inviting me. I did speak basically this same speech, but I've added more. I spoke about Vietnam at the in-person 4th of July barbecue in Berkeley, the annual barbecue that the party holds. And I brought a few props for that, which I would like to share right now. When I was in Vietnam for the month in April, May, to attend that big 50th anniversary commemoration, I was able to get a few flags. So this is what I had in Berkeley on the wall. This is the flag of the NLF, the National Liberation Front, which was essentially the Viet Cong, the people in the south of Vietnam that were under U.S. occupation that resisted that occupation and played a very big role in the war in the war effort. The Vietnamese flag, I have a big one, but this is the basic national flag, red field with a gold star. And then I also got a flag from my Vietnamese friends. These flags, the national flag, the Liberation Front flag, and this is the party flag of the Vietnamese Communist Party. They were everywhere in Ho Chi Minh City, leading up to April 30th and afterwards, and then also in Hanoi, because since then there's been an 80th anniversary, September 2nd, of Vietnam's Declaration of Independence in 1945. Okay, so I was in Vietnam for 1 month, from April 26th to May 28th, 33 days. It was my fourth trip to Vietnam. So I've been to Vietnam for a total of 6 months. And like many of you white-haired people, I was imprinted at a very young age by that war. I also had the wonderful good fortune to be in Cuba in 1985 on the Venceremos Brigade for the 10th anniversary of Vietnam's victory. And the Vietnamese ambassador to Cuba came to our camp and put this frayed yellow map up on the wall and pointed step by step the liberation from the north down to the south of April 1975. And I've got to say, that was definitely one of the political highlights of my entire life, that 1985 fortunate encounter in to be there during the anniversary in Cuba. I want to point out that I have an article about the trip on the People's World. All you have to do is Google my name, Nadya, Nadya Williams, and the People's World article will pop up. Also, on Facebook, I have about 90 photos with captions, and a picture tells 1,000 words. So all you have to do is send me a friend request. My email is really easy, Nadya Nomad, NADYA NOMAD @gmail. And I will friend you, but promise not to. I don't post a lot on Facebook at all, but it was just the easiest way for me to distribute photos, and they all have captions. So I put a fair amount of effort into that, and I think it really gives a comprehensive view of Vietnam, not just of that trip, but all the 6 months that I've been there, really. So a brief bio. My name is Nadya. I was named after Nadezhda Krupskaya, the mother of the Bolshevik Revolution and the wife of V.I. Lenin. My first demonstration against the Vietnam War was when I was 19, a sophomore at UC Berkeley. October 29th, 1963, Madame New came to the campus winding up a national American speaking tour to drum up support for the puppet government of the dictator Diem. Madame New was the sister-in-law of Diem, and her husband, Diem's brother, the two men, plus her, she played a huge role, received millions and millions and millions of dollars in American support to keep Vietnam divided and welcome in American occupying forces and the whole setup. Interestingly enough, 4 days after that demonstration on the Berkeley campus, we surrounded her car when she came out from the gym or speech, and we pounded on it to let her know that she was not welcome. 4 days later, her husband and her brother-in-law, Diem, were assassinated in Sai Gon. and the CIA had a role in that. It was a military contingent, Vietnamese military contingent that did the assassination. And 3 weeks later, our president, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated. So a lot of people feel that there's evidence, there are many, many connections there. I was also in the October 1967 huge demonstration in Washington, D.C., where we occupied the steps of the Pentagon. But to be honest, I was not an active member in the anti-war movements nor an officer in any of the anti-war organizations. When the liberation and the victory occurred on April 30th, 1975, I was relieved, definitely, but I was living in the country and I was pregnant with my second baby. So I was pretty busy doing other things. Like many Americans, we kind of forgot about Vietnam, certainly. But after 1975, there were so many other things to deal with. Iran, or wars in Central America, South Africa, Nicaragua, Ireland, on and on. And I did bring political education forums and things like that up to the country where I was living in Northern California. I do remember, however, the December 1971 Christmas bombing when I was living in the country. And my first baby was 1 year old, and I remember feeling very, very angry and depressed. So I think that consciousness of what our country was doing to Vietnam, has done to Vietnam, was very, very strong for so many of us. So fast forward to 1999, my job at Global Exchange, a wonderful international human rights nonprofit based in San Francisco. I was in the tour department, and my destination, among many others, was Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. So that was why I was able to go to Vietnam for the first time in 2003. So I was at Global Exchange for 9 years, from 99 to 2007. And then in March 2003, right when I got back from the Vietnam Global Exchange tour that I coordinated, we invaded Iraq. So I joined Veterans for Peace, San Francisco chapter 69, and then soon after the chapter in Vietnam, this is the hat for the chapter 160 in Vietnam, which is headed up by American veterans who live there full time. And it's a wonderful, wonderful organization. But I was very angry about our invasion of Iraq, and I felt like it was Vietnam all over again. And Veterans for Peace, unlike some other organizations, they accept associate members, non-veterans like me. So every year, Veterans for Peace conducts a 2-week tour to Vietnam. And everyone who goes on those tours must bring $1,000 as a donation. There was a regular tour in April and May when I was there, but it was only 2 weeks, and I was not part of that tour. I just intersected with them at certain points, but I wanted to stay for a month and I wanted to have independent travel. So the annual tours to Vietnam by Veterans for Peace started in 2012. We're up to the last spring was the 11th annual tour, and it is often um, veterans, American American veterans of the American War in Vietnam who have returned for the first time. So it's very, very moving and healing and cathartic for them. They all say it changed their life completely. And many of these men are in their 70s, and some women too, who were medical. And they didn't want to go back, but they feel comfortable going with other veterans. So it's a very deep experience for them. Veterans for Peace also participates in legislation in Congress, especially around Agent Orange dioxin. There's two bills that are there right now. This has been like over 10 years that we've supported this legislation. We know it's not going to be passed, but it raises consciousness, and it has gotten some funding from USAID to clean up the military bases. We also participate in lawsuits against the chemical corporations in America. That lawsuit started in 2005. There's one in France now on appeal. And then we do a lot of fundraising. We've raised about a third of $1 million to go to unexploded ordnance removal, Agent Orange dioxin victims, education for girls scholarships, bicycles for kids to get to school, things like that. Before the April, May spring trip, I just sent out an email if people wanted to donate, and I got $1,300, mostly from the Harry Bridges Club and from three American veterans of the war. So my intention, and I have connections to Vietnam, so I found a place to donate that, and I'll talk about that later. So because I've been in Vietnam for 6 months altogether, and actually with global exchange contacts too, I had a lot of contacts with organizations and individuals. National Veterans for Peace is really a great organization. It has a lot of working groups, China, Russia, militarism, and the climate crisis, among many others. And I'm also a member of VVAW, Vietnam Veterans Against the War. They also accept associate members, and they started in 1967. And they are still going strong with a newspaper, and I submit articles to get printed in the newspaper, and it's a great source for talking about our fundraising projects. VVAW funds a lot of libraries for children, complete with computer labs in Vietnam, and they're working on their fourth library now. So that's a really wonderful effort as well. Like I said, my article from the trip is posted in the People's World, but the same week in June that my article was posted, there's also an interview with the National Executive Director of Veterans for Peace, Michael McPherson. He's a vet of the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. So there's a pretty, there's definitely a connection. Okay, Wednesday, April 30th, Ho Chi Minh City, the 50th anniversary, is huge parade, about 20,000 at least participated. And it went through Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Sai Gon in the south, and then it branched out into four. The party representatives were there, Rosana Cambron and her husband Arturo. And then also there is a permanent party representative who lives full-time in Hanoi named Amiad Horowitz. He's a journalist and an academic. And he writes really, really interesting things about what's going on in Vietnam. There were only two foreign military contingents in the April 30th Ho Chi Minh parade. That they were from Laos and Cambodia. And Vietnam, those three countries, Southeast Asian countries that suffered under American war, those military contingents are always included in every major parade in Vietnam. Since then, like I mentioned, Tuesday, September 2nd, there was the 80th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, even a bigger parade in Hanoi. So in 1945, Ho Chi Minh actually took words from our Declaration of Independence to declare that the country wanted independence from French colonialism. I think they could see the American coming down the pipe. They'd been occupied by the Japanese during World War II. That was horrible. 2 million people died. And like I said, and they knew that Britain and the major Western powers wanted France to come back into Southeast Asia and reclaim their colonies. September 2nd in Hanoi, the parade was very different actually from the Ho Chi Minh April 30th parade because there was a Russian military contingent and a Chinese military contingent, which I think that's pretty significant that happened. So the April parade, there was a Chinese president, Xi Jinping, was there standing right next to the Vietnam Secretary General To Lam, as well as many other countries represented, obviously. Then 1 week later, May 9th, was the Soviet Victory Parade in Moscow, also an 80th anniversary of 1945. And there's To Lam again with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin at the Moscow May 9th military parade. The Vietnamese military always marches in the May 9th, the annual May 9th parade in Moscow. You can watch both of these parades, actually all three of them. Just Google or do a search on the internet. But the Vietnamese parades are very, very different. They start out with military, but then they go to cultural, sports, things like that. The Russian is only military. I think that's just a reflection of the different histories of both the countries. Speaking of Russia, I do want to insert that when I was in Ho Chi Minh City, before and after the April 30th parade, I happened upon a really interesting exhibit on Book Street, right next to the General Post Office, and it was a photo exhibit of female combatants from the American War in Vietnam and Belarus World War II. So it was very interesting to see photos of these elderly women, and if they had photos of these women when they were young, back in the 40s or 60s and 70s, juxtaposed with the photos of them today. Obviously, the World War II veteran women, most of them had passed on, but it just shows you there's a very, very strong bond of friendship, of fighting imperialist wars, and of supporting each other between Vietnam and the former Soviet Union, now Russia. For me personally, the highlight of Wednesday, April 30th, was seeing the double-decker buses with Vietnamese veterans, very elderly men and many, many women. I'm wearing a scarf. This is the scarf that the women wore who were the guerrilla fighters in the South, the National Liberation Front. And I got this scarf there's a museum to the women of the South and the huge role that they played in the war. There's a museum in Ho Chi Minh City, and that's where I bought this scarf. Another highlight of that day was just walking around in downtown. The parades are always early in the morning, starting around 7 and ending around 10, just because the the days are really quite hot, especially in the South in April and May. But walking around the city center with an American veteran of the war and shaking hands with people and having photos taken. And there was just such a feeling of joy and pride in their accomplishment and what they had done. I want to point out a very important book about April 30th. This is written by a woman. It's called Those Who Stayed. The author is Claudia Critch. She is a retired teacher in Davis, California, and she and her husband were young volunteers with the American Friends Service Committee. Actually, they were paid. They were they were supervising medical centers for disabled Vietnamese people. And she and her husband stayed for 2 months after April 30th, 1975. And this is a very important story. There was no bloodbath. And even today, I saw a video a couple of months ago. So I think it was from some French, one of the journalists, French journalists, and claiming that 30,000 people were executed on and right after April 30th, 1975. And that's a total falsehood. And she's this one lone voice, and she has been speaking out all her life. And now that she's retired, um, she finally finished this book. It's day by day. It's really a great read. Those Who Stayed, A Vietnam Diary by Claudia Critch, Krich. And I really encourage you, University of Virginia Press, I really encourage you to get that book and to read it. We're going to try and get her to San Francisco to speak publicly. Okay, really quickly, the economy. It says 7% positive growth in 1924. 15% of that is from tourism, and that's growing, as well as manufacturing and agriculture. They're really pushing their Vietnamese coffee and some other things. General Secretary To Lam says that the government is committed to continued economic growth, fighting corruption, because there's still quite a bit of capitalism there, especially in the South, and then consolidation of a lot of the elements of the country. There's 63 provinces. They're going to be consolidated now to 34, just to make things more efficient and bringing Vietnam into the 20th first century after the total destruction of the war. Government departments are also going to be consolidated, as well as people's organizations like the Women's Union, the youth, etc. And most importantly, they're working towards free universal health care, which is going to be, which we don't have, which is going to be quite a challenge because they're coming from behind. But I'm really pretty confident that the Vietnamese will be able to do that because they're such amazing, intelligent, determined, committed people. The United States is their number one trading partner. But happily, like many third world countries, they're turning more towards the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They've got some new trade agreements, Trans-Pacific, as well as European Union, Vietnam trade agreement. Trump has imposed a 20 to 40% tariff, 20% on Vietnamese goods coming directly from Vietnam to the US, 40% on Chinese goods that go through Vietnam to the United States. And that was enacted last month, August 7th, 2025 of this year, two levels of tariffs. Trump also cut USAID. We, Veterans for Peace backs an unexploded ordnance removal project. That funding was cut, but then it was restored temporarily. But there are many, many other areas of funding that suffered because of that cut. One of them being the cleanup of the U.S. bases through USAID. Da Nang has been done and finished, which heavily contaminated with Agent Orange and many other chemicals. But still to be finished is Bien Hoa, American Air Base outside of the former Sai Gon, outside of Ho Chi Minh City. And that was started in 2020. It's going to take till 2030 to finish that, and they're halfway through. Which is not good because soil has been exposed, and with the rainy season coming, the Agent Orange will spread and contaminate nearby neighborhoods. So Trump has, definitely negatively impacted Vietnam. Also, he's threatened student visas, and many foreign students, as you know, feel as well as other immigrants, temporary or permanent, are feeling under threat. Today, there are many, many multinational corporations, both in the north and the south, skyscrapers all over the place in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. Yes, we've all heard that Trump bought a piece of land outside of Hanoi and wants to set up a multi-million-dollar resort and golf course. I have heard that that has been sold to another entity, but I will have to, we'll see if that unfolds. But I know that that was something that angered and upset a lot of us. And then with his new attacks on Vietnam, I hope the Vietnamese are rethinking that. At my July 4th presentation, there was a question about, well, is Vietnam a worker state? And so I wanted to include information on labor rights in Vietnam. So the first labor code was established in 1994. It's taken them a long time to recover. That's 20 years almost after the end of the war and the end of the U.S. embargo, as a matter of fact. So there's been a lot of revisions since the 1994 Labor Code, but we have to bear in mind it's a socialist-oriented market economy. It's a hybrid, like China. So the new Labor Code was passed this June. In 2025, it'll go into effect in 2026. It will replace the 2013 Labor Code, and it they want to bring their labor standards, union rights up to ILO standards, International Labor Organization. This new labor code will expand unemployment insurance. It will make clear the responsibility between employers and employees. Get this, retirement age has a gradual increase for men to 62 by 2028. That's the retirement age, 62 for men. In a few years, that will be enacted. And then for women, the retirement age will go up to 60 by 2035. It also has caps on overtime and the requirement for written contracts, and then, of course, oversight and enforcement of all these, wonderful standards. And then just went into effect this summer for the first time. There's a labor code for foreign workers that had not happened before, and their right to join labor unions. So therefore now foreign and domestic workers in Vietnam have the same rights. As far as foreign policy, the government, there are four no's. And you might say that Vietnam is obsessed with peace and never entering again into a conflict or a war. So the four foreign policy no's are no military alliances, therefore peace with both the United States, China, Russia, and anyone else. No siding with one country against another in a conflict, and this creates a problem with Gaza and Israel because they're not speaking out about that. No foreign military bases. That's, I think, pretty obvious. And then no using or threatening military force against any other country. The government structure, there are national elections for the National Assembly, but only Communist Party candidates. And then the Assembly elects the General Secretary of the Communist Party, who is To Lam. He heads up the party central committee and the Politburo. There's President Long Trong. He's the head of state. This is mostly kind of a ceremonial. He would do the state visits and things like that. Then there's a Prime Minister, Pham Minh Chinh. So those are the three main heads of government, but definitely To Lam is in the most powerful position. The total population of Vietnam now is 100,000. Um, in the north, Hanoi, the capital, the population is 8 million. It is definitely more socialist. In the south, Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Sai Gon, is 10 million population. Ho Chi Minh City has tons of luxury shops and open elite prostitution. It's definitely more capitalist. I see a question in the chat about the gap between the haves and the have-nots from my friend Riva and Teen. And there's definitely a gap, and quite big. But the government is trying very hard, and really wonderful institutions like the Women's Union that I work with closely to close that gap and to not only spread the wealth, but bring more people into the economic prosperity. The war itself, you'll always see the death toll. I've seen 1 to 2 million, which is obscene, absurd. Most commonly, internationally, you'll see 3.8 million died. I and others, including many Vietnamese, feel that 5 million died during the conflict and 2 million afterwards. I think it's very, very important to consider the aftermath of every war. There was recently a great article by Bill Astore. He's professor of military history emeritus, and he quotes the Bible, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That's conquest, war, death, and then the aftermath, famine and pestilence. And I want to remind people that the so-called Spanish flu was directly a result of World War I, and between 50 and 100 million people worldwide died. And my family in Holland were directly impacted by World War I, and my mother's baby brother was disabled all his life and died young. They were Dutch. They were in Holland during the war till the end of the war, World War I, and no food, no fuel, no medical care. War exacts a terrible toll on people, and it certainly did on the Vietnamese with starvation, war wounds, lack of medical care. Agent Orange was a big factor, many, many things. So if you combine that with at least 1 million Laotians and Cambodians that were killed during our horrendous bombing, you have 8 million people from the Southeast Asian War. And then on top of that, Vietnam got a 20-year embargo. So that really rubbed salt into the wounds and made the destruction of the war continue and made it so much worse. 58,000 American veterans died. That's 58,000 names on the wall in Washington, D.C., but many, many more died of suicide, substance abuse, so-called accidents, things like easily 100,000 American veterans of the Vietnam War died after the war, easily. So they always say that if a wall was built like the one in Washington, D.C. for the Vietnamese, it would be 9 miles long. But that's using the lower figure. And if you use an accurate figure, like I think it should be, maybe the wall is 18 to 20 miles long. Agent Orange dioxin, world's worst chemical war crime, period. It's epigenetic. It adheres to the fatty tissue of humans and animals. So it continues to cause birth defects and a host of illnesses. It's in the 4th generation now. At the end of the war, there were 5 million victims. Now there's about 3 million. Half thousands actually millions of gallons were sprayed. 6 million acres of South Vietnam was sprayed. That's 1/6 of the total country, and it's 1/4 of the South. Uh, the North and the South were bombed, but only the South could be sprayed by Agent Orange to kill jungle, to so-called, they thought they were eliminating the cover for the Vietnamese fighters, so that America would have an advantage. But of course, it poisoned Americans. But because the spraying airplanes had to fly so low, there was no way that they could spray in the north. They would be shot down. So they only sprayed in the south. But it was 1/4 of the south of Vietnam. Today, like I said, it's going into the fourth generation with the birth defects and a host of illnesses, cancer, mental retardation, etc. But today, 4 to 6 thousand babies are born from with this generation to generation poisoning by Agent Orange and dioxin. Unexploded ordnance, also known as UXO. Um, at least 40,000 people have been killed by unexploded ordnance since the war. But today, about 1,000 per year are killed, and 1,400 are maimed. That's one of the goals of this Veterans for Peace initiated project called Project Renew in Quang Tri Province, which is right up against the DMZ, the 17th parallel that divided the country. Quang Tri is the most heavily bombed area, probably the entire planet, except maybe places in Laos. And they do remove the unexploded ordnance, but it's impossible to do that in Quang Tri or the entire country. So the main thing is education. But, unfortunately, you can have a farmer out there, education mainly for children. If there's a heavy rain, some of this stuff is exposed, and people will pick it up, and be killed or damaged by it. But if a farmer is hoeing around his banana trees and hits an unexploded cluster bomb, that's what happens. I traveled just to the others. I traveled to Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang, Dong Hoi, and Hanoi. Dong Hoi is just on the other side of the DMZ, right into North Vietnam, just above the 17th parallel. I went there because of the beautiful caves, but also had a very interesting encounter. And the whole province there, Quang Binh province, just above the 17th parallel, was also very, very heavily bombed because it's the narrowest part of Vietnam, the waist of Vietnam. And there were lots of networks of the Ho Chi Minh Trail there. So my article it really centers around this young man, Hong, who was a guide to the caves. Beautiful caves, or limestone caves, are now UNESCO heritage sites. But during the war, they sheltered military and civilians during the bombings. Hong's mother was 2 years old when her mother was killed in the bombing. So this young man, 26 years old, who worked in the tourist industry as a guide to the caves, he was very passionate, and you could feel the emotional pain that he still carried, because his grandmother never lived past her early 20s. She was killed by the American bombing. So this is one of the many effects of the war. And the part of the tour package to the caves, you have lunch, and he made a point of taking me to the back garden of the restaurant and showing me it's easily 6 foot high, huge shell that was left over from the American bombing. I then went to Hanoi for 16 days, fully half of my month there, because I love Hanoi and I've got some wonderful friends there. Like I said, the population of the city is now 8 million, but the area of Hanoi is actually larger than the area of Ho Chi Minh City. It's the nation's capital. It's got all the embassies, and it's the headquarters of all the wonderful organizations, like ones that I visited and have contacts with: the Women's Union, VAVA, the Viet Nam Association of Victims of Agent Orange, the Cooperative Alliance, where my best friend now works, Project Renew's headquarters is there, and the president of Veterans for Peace, Chapter 160, Chuck Sershi, has lived in Hanoi full time since 1995. He long ago received the Friendship Medal from the government of Vietnam. He is extremely well known and loved and respected by the people of Vietnam. And he can practically pick up the telephone and call the president of Vietnam. Uh, Chuck Sershi is a treasure. He is a 3-year veteran of the American Army, but he was in military intelligence, so not combat, and he was 1 year in Vietnam in Sai Gon. Also in Hanoi is VUFO, the Vietnam Union of Friendship Organizations, and many other groups. The Veterans for Peace tour visits all these important organizations and sites. You can go to the VFP160.org is the website of the Chapter 160 Veterans for Peace in Vietnam, and you'll see, actually my article is posted up there, but also the itinerary of the tours. We'll be mounting another tour next March. So all the multinational corporations are in Hanoi. It's an incredible transformation from 50 years ago. But also, there's more and more emphasis on housing and affordable housing for people. Vietnam has very strong links with Japan and Germany. Both of those countries were defeated in wars, but they were tremendously helped with rebuilding. Not so Vietnam. Vietnam was not only not helped, it was punished. The 20-year embargo was really very horrible and very cruel. So I think there's definitely not just NGOs, but business and governmental ties with Germany and Japan to help Vietnam rebuild and recover. There are many Vietnamese students in Germany, and in the United States, that student population is is reversing. Either they're leaving or not planning on coming. And there are also Vietnamese students in Cuba, as well as other countries. Tourism is booming in Hanoi, many South Asians. The $1,300 donation that I got went to a charity cooperative in a province just south of Hanoi. This is connected to my friend. She worked 25 years in the Women's Union, and now she's with this NGO. It's an international cooperative alliance. The money went for electric acupuncture machine, because most of the children in this cooperative clinic suffer from cerebral palsy, but I could definitely see victims of Agent Orange in the clinic as well. I also spent 4 days in a small city, actually really out in the country, through a French connection. The French people and government, Macron's wife was coming to Hanoi actually right after I left. Because it's the former colonial situation, they have a very strong relationship. So I also have French friends, Vietnamese French, and regular French friends who work in friendship organizations, Agent Orange, and they're the ones that mounted the lawsuit against the chemical corporations that was struck down in France, but is now on appeal. Something
Excuse me,
totally
Nadia.
new.
Nadia,
Yeah,
could you please wrap up in the next 5 minutes so we'll have
I
time for
will do that.
discussion? Thank you.
I got it right here. We're on cue. No problem. A vast new Vietnam Military History Museum outside of Hanoi. Enormous, enormous, with very professional displays. It's really incredibly impressive. But it really makes you realize that Vietnam has been subjected to centuries of invasions from China, Thailand, India, Japan, France, the United States, on and on. This museum opened in December 2024. But look at the map of Vietnam, their whole coastline is exposed. So these people have been fighting pretty much all their lives. The Military History Museum is also a very important repository for archives from the war. Many people, and my friend Ling's father was a doctor in the war. He has diaries. This is a place for people to put these things safely, and they're very, very important and much revered, not just the official history but the personal history, because so a huge portion of the population was subjected to the war and participated in the resistance. I gave them a book by Richard Burmack from Berkeley called about the veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. And interestingly enough, in the Ho Chi Minh Museum there is a section on the Lincolns, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and the international brigades that fought fascism in Spain in the 1930s. So I just felt that the History Museum was a great place. Okay, don't worry, Sharon. 5 minutes. The September 2nd, 80th commemoration of the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence. Like I said, Ho Chi Minh lifted words. He was hopeful that the country could be free, but that was not meant to be. In this parade, however, there were military contingents from Russia and China. I think it was very significant. So the April 30th had only two foreign contingents, Laos and Cambodia, but the September 3rd had four. The addition of Russia and China, along with Laos and Cambodia. It was held in Ba Dinh Square. You should look at pictures of this. You can look up. Oh yeah. What is it? I put it in the chat. The uh, Vietnam news source, but just Google it, and you'll see it's extremely impressive. Um, there were thousands of troops. It's in a huge square that fronts the mausoleum to Ho Chi Minh. It's the Vietnamese Red Square. There were aerial displays. First time naval contingent was on the water outside of Cam Ranh Bay. First time ever submarines and ships. There were 79 participating formations. There was cultural artists, actors, intellectuals, and sports people, athletes, workers, farmers, similar to the one in Hanoi in those respects, but I mean in Ho Chi Minh City in those respects. The one in Hanoi, I think, was different and expanded, and also new was a contingent of overseas Vietnamese. There are 6 million Vietnamese living abroad in about 130 countries. There were contingents for youth, students, emphasizing STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There were 54 ethnic groups, Vietnamese ethnic groups that marched in the parade, militia, guerrilla units, recreations of the war, women wearing these scarves. Um, and also there were veterans, obviously Vietnamese veterans, not only of the war against of the war by the United States, but also some really elderly veterans in their war, their resistance to Japanese occupation and French resuming the Dien Bien Phu, the famous Battle of 1954, where the Vietnamese kicked the French out. There was also a National Achievements exhibition in Hanoi, which apparently was so huge it was mobbed, and they had to extend the dates of that exhibition. It was held over. And again, okay, Vietnamese leaders soon after went to China for some meetings, the prime minister to Shanghai and the president to Beijing for China's 80th victory parade, where Putin was there as well. But interestingly, the parade in Beijing was closed to the public, and not at all like Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi, where tens of thousands of people camped out overnight on the sidewalks to watch these parades, very happy, waving flags, etc. Okay, and I just want to mention that the Medal of Friendship was given to Berkeley's own Paul Cox, who is a former combat Marine in the American War in Vietnam. He is the National Secretary of Veterans for Peace. I know Jean knows Paul, and he's also the Secretary of Chapter once Chapter 69 in San Francisco. And the Veterans for Peace president, Susan Schnall, who was a nurse during the war, she got the Friendship Medal in 2006. So again, People's World has my article. Send me a friend request if you want to look at my photos, nadyanomad@gmail.com. The Vietnam Express International, that's the site that has the best photos of September 2nd. And Sharon, just let me finish with two stories. I realized only recently that my escape in 1969 to the Mendocino coast to be a hippie mama and raise my three kids, that was my Canada. So many Americans were so disgusted and horrified by what we were doing to Vietnam that many left. I didn't get as far as Canada. I only got to the Mendocino coast, but I realized that that was my psychological and physical escape pod. And then I want to tell you the story about Medea Benjamin, the co-founder of Global Exchange, where I worked for 9 years, and also the co-founder of Code Pink Women for Peace. Medea was 16 years old in 1968. She was one of three girls in an upper middle class Jewish family in Long Island. An older sister, the older sister's boyfriend was drafted to Vietnam. He was in combat. He sent back a small package to the family. She's 16 years old, 1968. The family gathers around the table to open up this little package, and inside is a dried ear of a Vietnamese man. She said, needless to say, this was the turning point of her life, and she got the concept of the other. And this is the same dynamic that's happening now with Palestinians, that these people can be so dehumanized that you could do this to them. And this is why Medea Benjamin is a tireless, tireless advocate again for peace and against war. Closing, I just want to quote Secretary General To Lam, one sentence, his address on September 2nd. Quote, my final wish is for our entire party and people to unite and strive to build a peaceful, unified, independent, democratic, and prosperous Vietnam, and to make a worthy contribution to the cause of the world revolution.
Nadia, thank you so much. Beautiful quote at the end. We're just going to take a minute to tell you about our two future programs, and then we'll open up for Q&A and discussion. So next week, we have Roger Harris speaking on a very timely topic, narco state myth used to attack Venezuela. And so far, Trump has managed to destroy 3 boats and many people on those boats, and using the myth of the Venezuela as a so-called narco state. So that's next week, the 28th. And then on October 5th, we're going to have a talk by Charlotte Cates, a realistic assessment of Palestine 2 years after Alaska flood, countering imperialist Zionist propaganda. So we will welcome you to both of those and our future programs. We also would like to make an appeal for money. We need a little cash to keep this program going, to pay for our website and a few other expenses that we have. So if you go to our website, icssmarks.org, you can click on a button to give a one-time donation or periodic donations, and we
Fun.
urge you to do that. So now, if those who have questions or comment, please raise your hand, and I'll call on you in the order that I see you. Just click the react button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you. A few people have already raised their hands, so let me start calling on you. Let me go to Mike first, and then Philippa. Mike, could you unmute, please?
Fair
Go
enough.
ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I put a question in the chat. I just thought I'd short circuit it and just ask it.
Sure.
There was that brief war between Vietnam and China. I can't recall. I think it was in the 80s, perhaps. And then, of course, then Vietnam, even more important, actually, invaded Cambodia. And I believe they used the United Nations General Assembly mechanism to do that, because basically there was this genocide going on in Cambodia, and Hun Sen, I believe, was the Vietnamese leader who was the president at the time, and they were able to put an end to the genocide and install something closer to a stable government. Any chance? I don't know if you feel you want to speak to that or can speak to that, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Nadya.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Mike. I'm not an expert in either, but I do know that that incursion occurred in 1975, right after their victory. It's like, you know, it's honest to God, I think it was crazy, tragic, short-lived. And I know that since then, China and Vietnam have had fisticuffs over the what they call the North China Sea, or the East China Sea, and what Vietnam calls it their sea, right? The area between northern Vietnam and China, and some of the islands in there. But I think that has cooled down. The global military and economic situation in the world, really demands that they repair relationships, and they have definitely been doing that. And the Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia to help the people to take down the murderous Pol Pot regime. I think many people, I can't think of anyone who thinks that that was a bad idea, and that was extremely important. A friend of mine who I work with on the Girls Scholarship to Vietnam, she has a website called Friendship with Cambodia, and I encourage people to look at that, and that will give you a very good history of the Pol Pot regime, the American and Chinese support at the time for the Pol Pot regime. The US and China were the only people in the United Nations that did not vote against the Pol Pot regime. So, diplomatic situation and governments in China were way different at that time. But Friendship with Cambodia is a very good website, and that will give you a lot better background than what I'm able to.
Thank you. Philippa, please unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk, Nadya. I learned a lot. Um, I was wondering, you mentioned that Vietnam is a socially oriented, socialist-oriented market economy. And I was wondering, do you think it resembles more of the model of China or any other country that you could mention?
Mhm. Here again, there are better analysts than I. Um, there, I would direct you to the China Working Group, Veterans for Peace, called Pivot to Peace. Our San Francisco chapter vice president is Michael Wong, and Mike heads up the Pivot to Peace. And he has been extensively to China, but also to Vietnam, and that would be a place where a very good comparison of the two systems. But yeah, you know, um, China, of course, experienced its trauma, but Vietnam's trauma is more recent, very brutal. They're coming from way behind. They needed to fund and rebuild their country, and capitalism is the dominant game, unfortunately, in the globe. Um, the late leader of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, called it the dictatorship of global capitalism. And so people and countries are really pushed into a corner. And I'm afraid that they have to establish relationships and business and trade that they probably would rather not, but they have no choice in a lot of ways and are just trying to make the best of it to benefit their country. But corruption is a really big problem. The wealthy, obscenely wealthy, like this country, not paying taxes. But in Vietnam, they're from the top down, there is the will and the effort to make those people pay their taxes and to create an equitable society. So I think that's a big difference. And China too, raising 800 million people out of poverty. So there's quite a few similarities, both in the positive and the negative, with China.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, you can just click on the React button at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand. Alan, and then I'll call on Richard Wright. Go ahead, Alan.
Hi, Nadya. Very nice presentation. I have a question about some of the economic situation. If it's too much detail, let me know, but you did touch upon it. My understanding is that Vietnam exports about over 90% of its exports are to the United States. It's very, very dependent on exports to the US. And they were subject to the highest um, tariff rate based on the mechanical formula that the Trump administration came up with at the start of his tariff campaign, which has since been My understanding it's been renegotiated. Can you speak a little bit about how they've dealt with the situation of being dependent on exports to the U.S., but at the same time trying to disengage from dependence on the U.S. because the U.S. is so, as we know, well, we know what it is. So, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rick. And I'm sure you heard my my section that I, here again, in no way s- super proficient, but that they are trying to extricate themselves, if possible, turn to the BRICS and European Union and other trading partners, and the 20 to 40% tariff, 20% goods straight from Vietnam and 40% on goods from China through Vietnam. But I think tellingly, one of the friendship medals that was awarded on September 2nd, our Berkeley man, Paul Cox, was not able to go to Vietnam to receive the Friendship Medal, but there was another American there named Rick Mayo Smith, who I was not familiar with. He was in Vietnam, and he's an American businessman who received the Friendship Medal, but he established the Vietnam uh, business, let's see, yeah, 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 yeah. Uh, commerce, commerce, there we go. Let me look at my notes. Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Vietnam Chamber of Commerce. And he was very helpful and instrumental in getting American businesses to invest in Vietnam and also establishing fair trade. So there are these efforts definitely, and he was one, like I said, was one of the recipients of the Friendship Medal in the commemorations in September. So here again, they're trying to do what they can do, but yeah. United States, they get you coming and going, you know. The Clinton lifted the punishing 20-year embargo in 1994-95 on the condition that Vietnam not ask for a dime of reparations, right? Not one penny of reparations for the damage of the war. And then I'm sure, just like with the war, there's all these corporations, they're going to come in and they're going to, help you with this and help you with that, but it really lines their pockets. And I guess the Vietnamese are trying their best not to be ripped off. I'm sorry, I'm not so knowledgeable on that. And Sharon did warn me this is a very intelligent and sophisticated group that has a lot of knowledge and background, but I'm kind of all over the map. Yeah.
That's okay, Nadya. Let's go on. Richard, right, can you unmute, please?
Found it. Thank you for your presentation. You anticipated one of the questions I had, and that is the issue. I think it was like $4 billion worth of reparations, and I was not certain that we ever paid that. I know that it was blocked in the Congress, and I think you just pointed out that was it Clinton negotiated an end to sanctions if they didn't bring it up again. Anyways, my question I had was this. Way back when, I used to subscribe to something called the Bulletin of East Asian Scholars. I think that's what it was called, as well as the Far Eastern Economic Review. which is a product of the Economist magazine. As a way to get a handle on what was going on in the Asian Pacific realm. Can you recommend any such journals, periodicals that have reliable information we could tap into? Thank you.
Okay. Richard, you're asking about periodicals about
Yeah,
and information.
especially about the economy.
Mm-hmm. I would think oh gosh. Amiad Horowitz, who is the party rep in Hanoi, he speaks a lot about that. He's kind of my go-to on the economy. I'm thinking I'll research that and give that link to Sharon, is how to access Amiad's journalism and writing.
I think a lot of it is
I
in
would think,
People's World.
yeah, I think that would be the most accurate. And somebody also made the point that a lot of the well, Alan did, trade numbers are corporate as opposed to the state numbers. You also have to information directly from the government of Vietnam is difficult to assess. The kind of hold their cards close to their chest, as you might imagine. So to get that kind of insider's perspective is sometimes a bit circuitous. But I will get that contact information to Amiad's writing, and maybe Sharon can disseminate that somehow to
We'll be happy to add it
the
on the
forum.
website.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Sharon.
Next is Jean. Please unmute, Jean.
There we go. Well, Nadya, thanks so much for this great talk. I don't really have a question here. I just want to say that it's really a good talk, and thank you for all the work you've been doing. And I'm chair of the East Bay chapter of Veterans for Peace, and I do want to urge people, to join Vets for Peace if you can, because we are dedicated to the abolishment of war. And basically that means we have to take stands against, every war in the world that I can think of is basically, well, maybe not everyone, but, the primary cause of war in the world today is the United States government, raging from this, Cold War on China to, the oppression of Taiwan and the South China Sea. I just want to urge people to join Vets for Peace. We are an activist organization, and we are for the abolishment of war. So just want to put that little plea out there. But again, thanks so much for your talk, and thanks for all the work you're doing. It's great.
Oh, and thank you, Jean. And one of the things I really like about Veterans for Peace, it really has an analysis of capitalism. And it's not just kumbaya, peace, but it's an umbrella group for the young vets from Afghanistan and Iraq who mounted a Drop the Mic tour several years ago, Military Industrial Complex, the MIC. And Veterans for Peace really goes after that because that's where the rubber hits the road. And it's follow the money. And we all know that this whole American capitalist system is locked in to creating war and sustaining it.
And funding war in
Right.
Palestine and elsewhere.
Yeah.
In Ukraine.
It's the US-Israeli war against Gaza. That's what it is. Yeah.
I think one of the takeaways that I have from what you spoke, how you spoke about the history of the American War, Nadia, is that we who cut our teeth as organizers in the anti-war movement have lessons that we need to pass on to, or share, I should say, with those who are still organizing against U.S. international involvement and funding of wars. One of the big differences, of course, is that there was a draft back then, and there is no longer a military draft. We have an economic draft. We have the drafting of young people who see no way to a future in the middle class except through the in the armed forces of the United States, and and we have many proxy wars where other people are fighting in the interests of the United States and fighting and dying. And so it's harder to organize against US wars because few people are coming home in body bags to this country. And yet we must. And one of the things that's happening is that, but I think it needs to be expanded, and I'm wondering what you think, to work against that economic draft, to talk to young people about not enlisting, about the dangers of enlisting, of the danger to themselves, and also that they might not want to, if they understand better, they might not want to be join the forces of U.S. imperialism around the world. So that would be one food for thought among many that are important from this discussion. And then I also have a question for you. So the Vietnamese people who arrived in this country after 1975, between 1975 and 1985, as refugees, were mainly people who fought, or whose families fought with the Americans on the ARVN, the Army of South Vietnam. And they have, settled in various places, many in Southern California, and they were never considered to be progressive in their political thinking as they became Americans. But you mentioned that 6 million Vietnamese live abroad in 130 different countries. And that diaspora includes now the children of the people who first came here, and maybe even their grandchildren are growing up. I'm wondering if you have any sense of how those people are, feel themselves in solidarity with Vietnam, or look toward Vietnam as the place where their family immigrated from, and their attitude toward Vietnam. And I'm asking because I know a few, this is anecdotal, of course, but I know a few children and grandchildren of Cubans who first came after the successful revolution. And those descendants of the first people who came here are much less anti-Cuba and anti the Cuban regime than their parents and grandparents. And in fact, some of them are active in solidarity with Cuba and the campaign to block the embargo, etc. So just if you have any thoughts on that, Nadya.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say the most prominent member of that second generation, it would be Viet Nguyen, the Viet Thanh, Thanh, Nguyen, Nguyen. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning author of his first book called The Sympathizer. And he bridges that gap. That's the opening sentence in his book. Is like, I try something like the challenge is to see both sides of a situation, or something like that. There's a San Francisco Bay Area organization called Viet Unity of the young or now middle-aged children and grandchildren of a lot of the refugees from the Vietnam War that came to the United States and other countries. They're called those refugees are called Viet Q, and that can be used as a kind of a disparaging term. But the right wingers are mostly centered in Orange County, Southern California. But my article has a couple of paragraphs on a Vietnamese man who was conscripted into ARVN, the Army of the South, self-exiled to Southern California, but then joined Veterans for Peace, did a complete change around. He never wanted to fight his people in Vietnam. A lot of people were pressured into being on the side of the South Vietnamese government and the American government. And I call him John. That's not his real name, John Nguyen, but that's a very, very interesting story in and of itself. But I think we have to realize that because the United States put such a brutal hammer on Vietnam from 1975 to 1995 with the embargo, many of those refugees were economic. They were not political. They did not, they weren't in ARVN, or they didn't work for the Americans, and they were starving. It was horrible. And if they had any chance to get out, they could. And of course, that was used as a tool against Vietnam, right? Oh, look at all these boat people, they're fleeing communist oppression and violence. And that old lie that 30,000 or more were killed right after the liberation of April 30th, that is perpetuated today. I also want to mention a young Vietnamese filmmaker. Well, he's probably in his 30s or 40s now, Tony Nguyen. He made a great film called Enforcing the Silence. It's a story of 6 Vietnamese American journalists and community activists. This is in my article as well, who were murdered, assassinated in the United States starting in the early 80s. So these people enforced in the United States and other countries a silence against speaking out, about the war, especially if they were Vietnamese. And I'd see we're up to noon. I just want to mention the name of the organization of the young veterans that are under the umbrella of Veterans for Peace. They call themselves About Face, Veterans Against the War. And they're, Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria, Iraq, wherever we've been making war, this is the young people. And they definitely, can use our support, and they're a great group as well.
Thank you. So
But yeah, you're right. It's an economic draft.
We have one final commenter or questioner. Sheila, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Nadia. That was a great talk. I have a question about Veterans for Peace. Do you have to, two questions. First, do you have to be a pacifist to be a member of Veterans for Peace? And the second question is, how diverse is the organization? As we all know, the front lines, in the Vietnam War, they sent a lot of Black soldiers to the front lines because of racism. And I'm wondering if is there a substantial Black membership in VF, Veterans for Peace?
Good questions. Thanks, Sheila. No, you don't have to be a pacifist. I am not, and I think many members, recognize clearly, if they're in solidarity with the people of Vietnam, the right of the Vietnamese people to resist invasion, occupation, and a war against them. And there's a lot of the Vietnamese veterans and the American veterans have they have a special relationship that I do not have, of of fighting the good fight, and the American veterans, of course, being deeply regretful and apologetic about the role that they played. And that's why they're playing a positive role now. And also, so what was the second question, Sheila?
The diversity, about the diversity of membership of
Yes.
the,
Yes. Michael McPherson, our executive director, is African American. He did not fight in Vietnam. He's younger. He was in the Gulf War, the early 70s Gulf War. And in the on the board, there's diversity, but you're right, Sheila. There is, I think, there's maybe also a not that they're not welcome, it's super welcome, but veterans of color, those are the black and brown troops in Vietnam. Those are the ones that walked point. Those are the ones that suffered racism and discrimination. And those were among the very first to resist the war in Vietnam, refusing to fight, friendly fire, etc. But they are much smaller in the membership of National Veterans for Peace than we would hope. I think for a variety of reasons, some of which I think only they can explain to us. And just one last point, medical studies have shown that Agent Orange impacts Black veterans more than white. I'm not exactly sure why, but they suffered not only trauma and the war wounds, but apparently they have suffered more than most American veterans from the effects of Agent Orange. And it's another thing that Veterans for Peace does, is fighting the privatization of the Veterans Administration, the VA, the medical care, because actually the military is kind of a socialist system, and that's a huge draw, as Sharon pointed out. Now that there's not a draft, but an economic draft, you get a job, you get housing, you get schools for your kids, food, medical care. It's a socialist system, the American military system. So that's, they engineer it to get fresh cannon fodder.
thank you very much, Nadja. We're going to end the recording right now.